With that, let's go ahead and do introductions. So, Commissioner Helm, if you'd like to start, 2 minutes, who you are and why you're here.
2 minutes. I don't need 2 minutes, Seth. So I'm here because Seth asked me to be here. So that's pretty simple. Number two, we have a housing crisis in Oregon, as you all know. We have a lot of hurdles, and the county is working diligently on trying to either lower the hurdles or eliminate them. So the builders can do what they love to do, which is build houses. So I just want to be here to kind of give you some information on what Clackamas County is doing, hear your thoughts. I said I want to talk less, listen more, and the best part of all these are the question and answer periods. I think we glean a lot from that, and we can take away ideas that can help us do our jobs better. So I'm here to listen and here to do hopefully a pretty quick presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Mike Mitchell. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you all here. I've been an Oregon City Commissioner since 2022. I was appointed to a 2-year, the back half of Denise McGriff's term in 2022, and then I was elected to a 4-year term in 2024. I served on the Planning Commission for 4 years before that. And I think what's been interesting for me over the last few years is really for cities, the landscape has changed when it comes to housing and the rules. There's so much state involvement now, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about, that really has changed what we can and can't do in the city. And the challenges that go along with that, I think, are one of the main things that I want to talk about today. So glad you're all here. Just a little background, my wife and I live in the Caulfield neighborhood. We've lived in Oregon City for 18 years.
Hi folks, Ben Hemson. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Homebuilders Association of Greater Portland. Been in the role about 8 months, but prior to coming back over here, I actually grew up in Wilsonville, worked for the city of Bend for about 9 years and ultimately led their economic development group out there when we were kind of on the front end of these housing laws coming down from the state and trying to figure out how to incorporate them. We represent, and I'll touch on this later, 600 members working across infill, single family, and multifamily, Seth, development across the region. And really just, I pitch myself as a contract lobbyist to our members. They pay my salary, and it's my job to interact with city, county, and metro government around the region. But I think we've really set ourselves up to be more partners with those agencies. We're as reliant on cities and counties as I think they are on us. And maybe I'll be touching more on just a few of the big challenges our members are grappling with right now.
Great, thank you. As mentioned, my name is Seth Henderson, co-founder of Level Development Northwest. I'm here with my partner, Jenny Jenkins. We each have about 30 years in the industry. What we focus on is mixed-use multifamily infill. We purchased the old county courthouse, are currently working on that in Oregon City. We have a project in Gresham, another one in Wilsonville. Currently, I'm on the OCBA board, vice president of DOCA, the chair of the Oregon City Chamber of Commerce, on the Planning Commission. That's just in Oregon City, and no, I don't live here. So you can just refer to me as the guy who can't say no. So yeah, and when we originally got together and said, what do we want to cover? I expect that everybody here in the last few years has gone to events to talk about housing, right? It's been a hot topic. So how do we actually present something somewhat unique to you, and you walk away with maybe some action items and some additional thoughts about the challenges that we have with housing in the state of Oregon and what the state's trying to do, how it impacts the county, how it impacts the city. Ben and I'm also on the HBA board, so Ben is here. I'm hoping to talk about the impacts to single-family homes, and I can add some input from the private sector multifamily. So I'm going to set the table today. We're going to talk about the production goals for the state. Why do we have those production goals? How they were set? What has our history been as a state of production? And who is doing it well? Then we're going to have Diana and Mike talk about, what has the state passed? What has the impact been to the underlying municipalities? So all these bills are becoming laws. They are multiple parts. Some are still not incorporated yet from the long session last year. We've already been through another short session, so there's even more laws that are coming on. And how do they actually incorporate all of that with their current staff? Which I'm sure, Tony, is a challenge in itself. So, and then we are going to end with compare the impacts on both the public side and the private side, a little bit of what I just talked about. And then I'm hoping people are going to ask some questions about what can we do better. So we don't have a lot of slides on that, but if there are specifically pointed questions, please ask them, because I'm actually really curious what Diana and Mike would say about that, as well as Ben. All right, so how are we doing? 2023. The governor set Executive Order 2304, established the Housing Production Advisory Council, looked at how many additional housing units do we need? And that's every type of housing units. When we talk housing, it's not just single family, it's multifamily, it's middle housing, it's everything. And they said, okay, if we are going to produce a number over 10 years, to catch up to where we should be, we need about 36,000 units per year. Something that's really interesting, if you jump online and you say, how many units have we produced the last 3 years? If you are looking at something from one side of the aisle, all those numbers are going to be based on permits. That's faulty because not every permitted unit is built. You look at all the data from the other side of the aisle, and it's based on occupancy permits. Why is that faulty? It doesn't take into account anything that's in production. So when you're looking at how you're spinning the numbers, understand the actual answer is somewhere in the middle of what either party is saying. And if you've ever had a conversation with me, you know that I will probably bash today on both parties, because my issue is with policies, not party. Okay, so how are we doing against 36,000 units? And remember, this is permitted, so not all of those are actually going to be issued. And I thought this was interesting because this actually came out of the House Republicans, and they issued this in, I think, 2025, April of 2025. So that's why the 2025 number is projected. I think the final number was between 12 and 13,000. We're nowhere close. That's what that should tell you. We're nowhere close. If you look below that, I actually found that the current projections have now been changed. So as of December, and that was out of the governor's office, they're now shooting for 29,522. So that means one of two things occurred, right? If we're trying to build all the housing we need, as well as so the shortfall as well as looking forward, that means one of two things. We're overproducing, which clearly we're not, or there's less demand, which means less people are coming to Oregon. So I have to believe that that number's been reduced based on current outlook of how many homes we need based on people coming to the state of Oregon. Okay, so everybody understand how we got to the number we need and how we're actually doing, which is extremely poor? Yes? Okay. How about how well has the state of Oregon done since 1988? So this graph is actually done by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. And it looks back to 1988, and those are, if you look at the numbers, that's on a monthly basis, what has the state produced. So times that by 12, and that's for the year, and though you can see each one of the years are up there. The grays, anybody want to guess what those are? Look at the years. Those are recessions, right? So each of those grays is a major recession event. So 2005, that's the best year we've ever done as a state. And in 2005, even though you do the multiplication and it tells you it's like 32,000, the actual numbers for that year were between 30 and 31,000. So to hit the goal the governor set, we have to hit the most we have ever built in a single year for 10 straight years. So hopefully everybody's realizing how difficult of an actual goal this is. And honestly, I appreciate an elected official that says, let's set a really high goal. If we miss by a little bit, at least we've done massive production compared to previous years. But if you look at the permitted numbers, we're way off. Can anybody tell me why, if you look where we are right now, why in 2022 did that curve start going down? What happened in 2022? Interest rates, right? Federal Reserve Board says, hey, inflation's out of control. Let's raise interest rates. It's interesting because if you listen to Powell talk, he will say, we're interested in jobs and inflation, and we have no control over housing. It's not a true statement. So the higher the interest rates, the harder it is to get a loan, the harder it is to make the loans that you can get actually pencil out. So very much interest rates have impact on the actual production of housing. Okay, you probably can't read everything on here, so I'm just gonna get through this relatively quickly. When looking over the last 10 years, the city that most economists look at when it comes to housing is Austin, Texas. So Austin, Texas had a ton of tech companies come in, required a lot of housing, and their rents were severely impacted. They deregulated, and they actually got the rents back under control. So everybody is looking at Austin right now saying, what did they do to produce the housing? So over 10 years, they increased their housing stock by 30%. So it's a smaller city. That 30% is 120,000 units. But clearly they were doing something right. And their deregulation, if you look at it, it is actually very similar to Oregon. Getting rid of parking minimums, upzoning, so increasing density. The one other thing they did, and this was just, I think, last year, 5-story buildings or less, and 5 stories important because dimensional lumber, that's as high as you can go. 5 stories or less, you only need 1 stairwell for egress instead of 2. And there's a lot of people that argue that's kind of like the holy grail of how you increase production in garden style or wood product. So we're not there yet, and that's fine. If you look at the rents, and again, it's really hard to read, but you'll actually see the dark blue is Austin, the light blue is US. The dark blue actually increased 40% at one time. So at one time, rents had gone up 40%. And if you look, it's over like a 2-year period. So all these big tech companies are coming in, they're bringing all these jobs, all these people. They're like, we don't have the housing. So they start changing the regulations. And then you had production. So the other interesting thing about Austin, every national developer goes, wow, look at the rents. They went up 40%. We want to build there. So they all come in, they all build at the same time because they're all looking at that data at the same time. And now you have oversupply. And what happens when you have oversupply? Rents drop. So if you look at the 10-year period at Austin with that production of 30%, even though the rents at one point were up 40%, it went up 9.15% over 10 years. Less than 1% per year. So my theme today is supply. We need to produce. We need more supply. On the right side, that is actually a table of the different types of housing that occurred in Austin. The ones I'll call out, what do you think that purple is? I don't know if you can actually read it, but what do you think that purple is? Multifamily over 50 units. What is the easiest way to produce housing? And yes, I am in multifamily, so I realize this is, there's interest to me saying this, but this is data. Almost 50% of the units they produced were multifamily over 50 units. So when Mike starts talking about what's occurring in Oregon City and there's no multifamily, I'm going to raise my hand and point to the screen so you guys can see it. The other major one is orange. Single family. Austin has a ton of land. We have an urban growth boundary. We don't have a ton of land. If you want a massive amount of production of housing, especially if you believe everybody should own something, we need more land for single family housing, and we need more multifamily development. And so that represented 75% of all the units produced in Austin. So right now, a lot of people are talking about middle housing. And again, when Mike talks about the permits in Oregon City, it's a lot of middle housing. And that is something to get excited about. That's not going to solve our problem. Taking a single family lot and putting 3 units on it, not going to solve our problem. We need to think bigger. And I think this is the last slide before I hand it off. So, where do we sit today nationally? I just think this is some interesting information. So, the pandemic actually hit in terms of lease up, in terms of product, in terms of rents, about March of, I think it's 21, right? So that's kind of the baseline. When people are looking back, they're saying, this is what we want to get back to, March of 21. And this is how many units were available in the United States, so yet to be leased, about 500,000. On the right-hand side, you see where we are today. So let me get this data right in the notes section. So there are 85,000, this is nationally, 85,000 completed units that haven't been rented yet. So what they call the stabilization period. So once you finish a project, it slowly starts to lease up, you get 90 to 95%, that's stabilized. So there's 85,000 units out there that have been built that have never been rented before. We are tracking this year, anybody want to guess how many units we're going to produce nationally? It's a smaller number than you would think. It's 300,000. And on an average year, looking at the last 10 years, you lease up 350,000 per year. So what does that mean? That means to get that 85,000 down, it's not going to be this year because there was a 50,000 delta, right? 300,000 built, 350,000 leasing up. So what it means is we probably have enough product leasing up until middle to end of next year. And that's because when interest rates were low, everybody produced product. And now all of that is leasing up. What do you think is going to happen middle to end of next year? With nothing right now being produced, you're going to see rents probably 6 to 8% per year if we don't change something. Okay, so that's a very cheery view of where we sit today, right? Kind of setting the table. So I will pass it off to Commissioner Helm on how is the county helping us resolve this issue?
May I use the podium without your,
Absolutely.
I don't want to ruin your computer here. Thank you. Thank you.
Big button.
Thank you. Big button. The forward button, Seth, that's the one. Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here. This is a really important topic, and I think one that a lot of people are trying to solve. And I think putting some good heads together and coming up with some ideas, and maybe going to our legislators and working on this collaboratively is a really good idea. Anyway. Good morning, good afternoon now. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to follow a script a little bit just because I tend to get off topic really, really easily. So we do have a housing crisis. There's really no easy solution or approach to the problem. And there's some disagreement, and this really comes mostly from me, about what type of housing we should have. And as we're building all these multifamily housing, when I am at the bank and the teller is talking to me and he goes, oh, what happened to starter homes? What happened to a little ranch house with a small yard so I have a place of my own? I don't want to live in a big box. And I say because the builders can't make it pencil. The land is too expensive, right? It's less expensive to build the multifamily units. My worry is 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, are we going to have a glut of these multifamily housing units? I don't know. I can't predict the future, but I just do want to be a little visionary and think ahead that way. So And it's also true that while we're tackling the issue, we're bound by the rules set by the state. Starting with House Bill 2001, which focuses on middle housing. And the county has struggled to keep pace with the state mandated requirements on housing, which Seth just pointed out. We're invested, the county is very invested, heavily invested in housing production. Because of that, planning and development is working diligently to facilitate housing development and remove as many barriers as possible. The goal is to provide support to private builders to build the needed housing. First, I want to talk about a little bit of the good things that we do, and I'll say DTD a lot, which is our Department of Transportation and Development, which is the people who do all the planning and stuff. Our staff is doing a great job. They're doing things to incorporate some of the state mandates. They're listening to the commissioners on changes needed that help developers and help builders. And right now, there is a 2-week turnaround time for residential permits for first review. So we are trying really hard to get things on a fast track. And our planning department last year had over 400,000 interactions. And we have a little rating thing when people leave, and we have over a 90% approval rating from clients who come into the county. So I'm very proud of our DTT staff and all the hard work that they do. So, onward. To that. That's the forward button. There we go. Okay. Okay. So, in regards to the state mandates, the county is exploring a number of things, like we're updating our roadway standards. We're doing ADA compliance for better access to archives and documents that are more readable and searchable. We're updating our lighting bylaws, and we're creating alignment and consistencies to code and standards. I'm not sure why there's such a delay here. Am I pointing in the right direction?
Try pointing it at the laptop.
Oh. It's a slow computer. It worked for Seth.
Sorry.
I'm just going to be back here in case you...
Okay, okay. Well, just tell me what button to push over here. It's way easier, I think. Okay, so, all right. So, more specifically, the county has embarked on a number of specific housing production projects that address the issues in more depth. I won't go into all the gory details because it gets really crazy, but I definitely want to point out that just so you have an idea how important this issue is for us. So back in 2023, we had the Housing Strategies Project, and this was divided into 2 phases. Phase 1, to increase the density and change parking requirements, which we did, and we're getting lots of complaints about, so we do have to address that. Phase 2 will allow duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, and more in urban low-density areas, among other things. And then in 24 and 26, we did minor and time-sensitive amendment changes, and this is regular work that focuses on changes to the ZDO, the zoning and development codes, to comply with the new state and federal mandates. In 2026, we're working on urban zoning and development rules assessment. This addresses rules that apply within the Portland Metro UGB. So all these layers, you got the state, you got Metro laying on their layers, and then we're trying to, at the county level, we're trying to incorporate all of this into our own codes, which every time a new law comes out of Salem, we have to go back and revisit these codes. And it is cumbersome, and it takes time, because sometimes they conflict with prior laws and rules that the state has set up. So it's just it's very time consuming, and I'm sure our DTD staff would wish that it does not happen. I'm going to try this now. Space? There we go. Yeah, like there. So, and then in 2026 and 2027, we're implementing recommendations from ZDO, a ZDO diagnostic report. We're kind of diving deep into this and changing a lot of these things to try to make it simpler for developers and builders to do their work. In 2027 to 2030, we're implementing Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. Oregon Housing Needs Analysis These are the owner rules. This is a very important one because since every jurisdiction has different timing targets, this allows us to look at those jurisdictions from our own view and decide what is appropriate for us. Now, I want to touch on some of the things that the Housing Authority of Clackamas County is working on in efforts to address the housing shortage. So, using affordable housing bond funds, the county is opening 451 new affordable apartments in 2026, including 52 with supportive services. That's huge. These are the services needed that our SHS funding is taking care of to pay for the services provided at these units. And between 21 and 2025, we have developed 1,170 new affordable apartments, 229 of those with supportive services. And they include, there's a little map here, Rosewood Station, 212 units, Hillside Manor renovation, 100 units, Tukwila Springs, 48 units, Fuller Station Apartments, 100 units, Good Shepherd Village, 143 units, Las Flores, 171, Bear Creek Apartments, 60 units, Mercy Green Bray, 100 units, Blossom and Community Apartments, 100 units, Short Stack, Milwaukee, 15 units, and Vuela, 121 units. We have built a lot of affordable housing in Clackamas County. Yay, right? But Clackamas County did that. We need our private developers and builders. We only do county stuff. They're separate from that. So we want them to be building on top of what we're doing too. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I want to briefly bring up, and I think Seth is going to go over some of the laws at the end. I just want to bring up House Bill 4037. So the county provides public housing services to people in need and private housing services to developers. And I just want to say we're doing everything within our power to make it easier for the developers. And when they come to us and they say, this is ridiculous, we need this changed, we're looking at our codes and we're looking at our rules and saying, you know, sometimes these regulations are so cumbersome that they're hindering progress. And I want to make sure that we're addressing all those issues that come before us. Our county is a high performer in the region with both of these services, and bills that aim to address housing, whether private or public, overlay statewide laws to fix problems that we may not be experiencing here in Clackamas County, but we must comply with them otherwise. We need to be friendly with development, but reasonable, within reasonable constraints and consistent with safety guidelines and Oregon values. And I just hope that the state and local governments and even developers can enter a room one day and develop legislation together, maybe at the same table, rather than advocating on opposite ends of the bill that come forward. I just think that we have an opportunity to do good work and fix what's broken, and I think that we have the right people in the room to do that. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Mike Mitchell from Oregon City and see if he can work the remote control.
I'm going to use this handheld one because I can't stand in one place when I talk, and hopefully I won't splash my water all over me.
Space bar.
Okay.
It's easier
Thank
with
you.
the remote control.
So when I looked at the title of this workshop, a couple of things struck me. First off, it's not going to be density or, and I'm not going to use the word sprawl, I'm going to use the word expansion, because I think we can expand without getting to what people look at as sprawl. But it's got to be and, not or. We're going to have to obviously use every tool in our toolbox to get there, whether it's multifamily housing, new housing types, increased density, expansion. We're going to have to use every possible tool. So what I'm going to try to do, I'll talk a little bit about the state laws that have affected the city, how the city's responded, a little bit about the numbers so far, and then where do we go from here. So, there it goes. So over the last few years, the state has adopted over 20 bills related to housing, and I'm going to try to stay out of the way, except these guys over here know all this because they helped write this. In fact, I wanted to thank Kelly Hart, our Community Development Director, and her staff for helping me with all of this. So over 20 bills, 2 of them really moved the needle, and we'll see that in a few minutes. HB 2001, that ended single-family only zoning. So anywhere where we build single-family homes, we now have to allow duplex, triplex, quadplex, and cottage clusters. That has moved the needle, and we'll get into that. And then SB 458, which enabled small middle housing land divisions, an owner that had enough property to build another 2 or 3 units can go through an expedited property process and do that. The other 20, honestly, for the most part, were administrative kind of things. Not that they didn't help, you know, they tightened up deadlines, they made the process simpler, all of which helps get housing built, but I don't think really is affecting the numbers. But what it does do is it puts a real burden on our city staff administratively, because they have to, on every one of these things that comes along, and they change constantly, what does our current code say? What do we have to change? When we have to change, we have to write new code. It has to go before the Planning Commission. It has to go through a public process. It has to come to the City Commission. And all of that takes time and money. And I think it might be frightening to know over the last few years how much of our planning staff's time has been spent reacting to state laws and state changes as opposed to really helping citizens in Oregon City. Move on here. I covered up the space bar. What has the city done? Sorry. HB 2001, that was the land, the quadplexes, duplexes, and so forth. We adopted that ordinance in 2022, and you'll see what a difference that has made. SB 1537, this one enabled developers to have automatic adjustments to certain aspects of our code if they could show that by abiding by the rule in the code, they were only able to build less housing units. And those were automatic adjustments that they could get. What the city was able to do, and there's only a few cities in the state that have done it, we got a waiver to that process because we were able to prove that our current variance process was working for everybody. Builders were able to get variances when they need them. We were still able to abide by the basics of our code. So we do not, in Oregon City, have to automatically offer those, automatically approve those adjustments. They can go through our regular process. And then the third thing that's coming up in the future, and I'll talk more about later, is HB 2003, which is housing capacity analysis and housing production strategy. So let's look at some numbers for a minute. These are permit numbers going back 10 years. The dark blue is single-family homes, the light blue is multifamily, and the gold color is middle housing, duplexes, triplexes, so forth. HB 2001 took effect at the end of 2020, and you'll see what's happened. 2022, there were a few missing middle permits. 2023, there were more. I think it's about 30 permits in 2023, 20 or so in 2024, and then 234 last year. So that bill that allowed for those missing middle styles, we can prove it. It really did make a difference. You know, if housing was a big science experiment, it's a horrible experiment because we can't isolate the variables and really know what is going on. As was mentioned by Seth, interest rates, how is that having an impact? Uncertainty at the federal level, tariffs, all of that. But in this case, it seems pretty dramatic that that change in the law did get those middle housing styles built. And we're also seeing 2 in 2022, and 23 applications in 2023 for those expedited land divisions. Does anybody else, when they look at this chart, does anybody see a scary number on there? Other than the fact that we're still not in the target. Okay, this is not planted. I don't know what he's going to say. What?
Can you point out the light blue in 24 and 25, please?
Yeah, it's down here. There weren't any. In the last 2 years, we've had no multifamily applications. Mr. Fowler? Is that applications or products? It's permits. Because wasn't there 2 large multifamily projects? Those are back into 2022 and 2023. Los Flores is in 2022 and Mill on Maples in 2023, and Timberview by the college, I think, is further back. The dark blue number scares me. 2021, 22, 23, 25, 50 single-family home permits in the city of Oregon City. That's not enough in a city of 38,000 people, and there was a 0 in there in 2024. So the middle housing is great, but what has happened to single-family homes? And the other thing that concerns me, yes, we had 234 middle housing permits, but a lot of that was pent-up demand. It was people that all of a sudden could do that and never had been able to do it before. And I think what proves that, we're in April, we've gone through 4 months of this year. Guesses on how many middle housing permits this year? You got it, 0, none. So that was a blip. Not to say it was not an important blip and not something we want to have happen, but. Okay, where are we headed next? 2 pieces of work that our city will be producing. First is a housing capacity analysis, and that work has already started. And that looks at what capacity we have. It looks at the infrastructure complaints. It looks at our overlay zones in the city and the state targets, and comes up with how many homes could we legitimately build. And that work is going on now. Following that, which I think is in the 2027, where's Pete? Pete Walter is our city planning manager. 2027 to 29 biennium, we'll be creating the housing production strategy. How do we get there? What do we need to simplify in our process? Are there incentive programs? Are there partnership programs that we can do, land banks or shared equity or whatever? The housing capacity analysis is a technical document and won't have a lot of public input, but there will be a lot of public input in the housing production strategy. And that work is coming up. I forgot to mention one thing that I wanted to mention earlier on. When we did the HB 2001 implementation, we did have the option as a city to protect, excuse me, the density limits that we have in the geologic hazard areas. So there is sometimes some flexibility that we can apply for our city. Let me just catch up here now. So as I mentioned, we have these 2 projects in process. We've adapted to the 2 bills that I talked about earlier that are actually changed the numbers. We implemented that code, and then we're at the beginning of that process to create the housing needs analysis. I want to say one more thing and then I'll stop, and this is a little bit personal. As I've dug into this deeper, getting ready for this presentation, my thought process has kind of changed a little bit for me. You know, the old saying, you can't fight City Hall. In this case, we can't fight the state legislature. We're on this train. And what we need to do as a city, and what I'm going to be working on in the rest of my 3 years on the commission, where we have the ability to lobby for our city. Kelly Hart, who I mentioned, she's an experienced lobbyist, so part of what she's doing, in addition to being community development director, she lobbied for the city during the short session. She will be coming in the upcoming long session to try to get the city input in there. But then we're going to have to keep our emphasis on how can we, where we have the local control, where can we not modify, but comply with the state law and still try to keep it what's right for the city of Oregon City and for our residents. So I think that's where we've gone. The other thing that is clear to me, and Seth is going to get into this a little more with one of the bills he's going to talk about, but goal 1 does not mean what it used to. Public process is not nearly what it has been in the past. In addition to that, I just totally lost my train of thought. Home rule. You know, we talk a lot about home rule. home rule is not what it was 20 years ago. That's the reality. We've got a big challenge ahead of us to try to produce housing. We can do it by working together, and I'm excited to do it. So thank you.
Okay, I'm pretty jealous of Commissioners Helm and Mitchell having all this planning and permitting staff to help them out. I mentioned I worked for a city. I'm not a planner, but I was in a meeting and someone actually pointed out, well, Ben doesn't know anything about planning, so us planners will figure it out. And I kind of haughtily replied, well, I got a graduate minor in planning. And the growth planning, long-range planning manager turned to me and said, you do a really good job hiding it. So not a planner. Spent most of my time in economic development and government affairs. Whenever you work for an association, you always have to start with a slide about what you do. So we are, I think traditionally people think of the Greater Portland HBA as an organization for single-family home builders and developers, but we have a lot of infill developers. Seth has been kind of helped coalesce, I'd say, a number of members around multifamily development and really sharpen some of our advocacy around that as well. So we represent, when we talk about home building, we're talking infill developers in Portland, production home builders throughout the region, especially in Clackamas and Washington County, and then multifamily developers as well. So we really do try to kind of walk the talk around, we need all of the above when we talk about housing. And then I touched a little bit on how I view government affairs at the HBA, really working with cities, identifying issues. Everyone before me did such a good job teeing things up around the issues with housing. So I just want to plug briefly kind of what governs my day-to-day work, and that's our policy, our housing policy agenda. It's our policy priorities. I have a couple of copies in my folder over there if anyone really wants to get in the weeds. And it's on our website as well. But really it comes down to three things: land availability, time, permitting, efficiency, how quickly are those permits getting out, and then third, cost. And a lot of those things in there are tactical. It is killing me because one of those on there, number 2 under cost, we really want to see SDC increases tied to consumer price index, construction cost inflation over time. But this is really pretty tactical stuff. Happy to talk about it. Haven't met with a lot of folks from Oregon City yet. I'll probably be reaching out at some point, but really, how do we kind of move the needle slowly to help make building housing a little easier? What I want to touch on today are two much bigger issues. And I just didn't hit the space bar, hit something else. Is it going to work? Okay, first is land supply. And really, when we talk about land supply, at the beginning of this, this whole presentation, density versus sprawl was thrown out as we have to pick one. I'd say in Oregon, we've already picked density. We have already moved away from sprawl with SB 100 in the 70s. We are still, that's kind of an environmental and I think development ethic throughout the region. Whenever we talk about fixing land use, it quickly becomes a discussion of, well, we're going to sprawl to the horizon. Our current land use system doesn't do that, but it does have big issues that we think need to be addressed. I don't work a lot at the state level, but so I'm going to try to focus more on kind of the local component of it. But up here you can see Metro's UGB map. That purple is what was in the UGB when, I think, and Aaron, I'm kind of looking to make sure you're nodding along here, when the UGB was drawn for the Portland Metro region. Thank you for the thumbs up. Back in, I think, 1979. So since then, the population of the Portland Metro has more than doubled, and we've added about 14%, 15% to the urban growth boundary across about, I think Metro uses the term 36 expansions over the years. You can see the bright ones on there. Those are the ones that have expanded recently. So there's land out there. It isn't always where the market wants housing. We've certainly seen a lot of interest in the last couple of decades on the west side in Washington County, really I think tied to some of the big employers over there. But really the big issue that I think we run into when we talk about land supply in Oregon and the Portland Metro especially is the planning horizon from when you identify an expansion area to when it's actually built. King City, Kingston Terrace up there at the top, identified in 2018. They started turning dirt at the end of 2025. Cooper Mountain, 2018 as well, kind of ready for annexation in Beaverton. Frog Pond East and South, again, identified in 2018. Construction hasn't really started there yet either. We have 2 areas with planning underway right now, and I know in the case of Sherwood West, identified in 2023, I think, probably in the 2030s before we're actually building homes in that expansion area. So that's a big challenge. I mean, think back to 2018 in this region. You had Intel doing well, Nike stock was over $100. I think Portlandia was still on TV. Portland had a different mystique than it does now. Things have changed. How do you get from we need this land in 2018 to a home builder being able to respond to a market 8, 10 years later with a product? And the products and the development standards are changing over time as well. So when we talk about land, it's not how do we sprawl, it's how do we get some land so we can actually get some houses and respond to what the market needs. The other big challenge I want to talk about is cost. System development charges, really the impact fees that pretty much every city in Oregon levies on new development. What you see here, and I wasn't sure how this colors would show up, but at the bottom in the blue, the SDC levied by these cities in Clackamas County in 2016. At the top in green, and that's additive, so layered on top, the top of that chart is what the current SDC is for those cities as well. So 2016 through 2026, that's a high inflation period. I think we're all familiar with that. Depending on the source you look at, the construction cost index, so how inflation stacked up over time, says that construction is about 40 to 50% more expensive than it was in 2016. But in some cases, we've seen increases, and not just in Clackamas County, far beyond that. And the implication there is not just homes don't get built, it's really how much do those homes cost. There's a general rule of thumb around development, 15% of your cost, permitting, development, impact fees, government imposed costs. And that's probably on the high side. I'm looking at some of the developers in the room, probably would prefer to be a little lower than that, because afterwards you come in with construction, land costs, and you have to get a return at the end of the day as well to kind of incentivize continued development. So if you think 15% in Wilsonville, and I'll pick on them because I grew up there, that's 62,000 SDC that is up there right now. You layer on the permitting fees, you layer on the construction excise taxes, and then potentially a supplemental system development charge in one case, you get to about $105,000 in fees for a single family home in one of their expansion areas. So if you do that, if you back that out, that 15% math, you're looking at a $713,000 home, right? Pretty hard to get to $400,000. I'm actually much more concerned. You can sell $700,000 homes in Wilsonville. In Sandy, where the SDC is now $55,000, I don't think you're seeing a lot of $700,000 homes sell there. That market's looking at $400,000 to $500,000. So this is a huge burden, and SDCs provide vital infrastructure, but we need to acknowledge that we must find other ways to finance it. And you heard about some of the state rules, I'll touch on them in a second, but we have to, instead of just changing code, find alternative funding sources to get infrastructure built that lets development happen. All right, so I told Seth I would touch on legislation. To be clear, again, I have to always reiterate this. We work with the Oregon Homebuilders Association. They really lead the way down in Salem. My focus is, as I mentioned earlier, metro, county, and city. But there have been a number of changes that are impacting development and really affecting the process. You can see them there. They're kind of they're detailed out. Really, instead of setting a floor for what a city must do around noticing, we're starting to see more caps. So instead of saying you must notice at least 500 feet away from a development, we're now seeing you must notice no more than 100 or 500 feet away, and also paths to exempt development out. And I think that helps development, but I don't think that really moves the needle when you compare it to something like land supply or the actual cost of development. Folks that build bake in public outreach. They plan for it. I think, Seth, you told me you've been to you can't count how many neighborhood association meetings in the course of your work. So these things are coming down, cities are implementing them. In the case of Happy Valley, just last week, I saw on their council agenda, they had about a 6-page memo detailing code changes they had to make. And I touched on earlier, cities are our partners in this work. They're angsty right now. They're having to do a lot of work that maybe is outside of what they'd like to be focused on. And in some cases, we're seeing pushback. Sherwood just had a charter reform ballot measure that passed in January, really that I think they hope lets them step outside of current state land use law around noticing and call on home rule as an opportunity to avoid some of these or really raise the bar on what they want to notice on development going forward. That's a real direct reflection of some of the concern that some of these issues are raising. So it's a double-edged sword. We want to see fast permitting, but at the same time, we need cities to work with us as partners. I will touch on HB 4035 because Seth is going to talk about 4037 in a second. That's a revamped one-time UGB expansion effort, really, and the implications in the metro area are potentially a little different than they are in outlying counties that we work in. But it allows certain cities to kind of pop out their UGB one time for up to 150 acres, net acres, so without counting roads and parks and things like that, for housing. That's good, that's great, but I actually went through a process like this in Bend where we got a one-time expansion of 50 acres, passed in 2016, broke ground in 2025. So again, the planning timeline is a huge barrier to getting this stuff built. It's not just getting the land, it's how can we get there more quickly. And I'll just do a plug at the bottom before I wrap up for the Housing Accountability and Production Office, HAPO, a new office that I think was created in 2024. I think finding their feet, but serving as a bit of a useful arbiter between the development community and cities and counties around what all of these laws actually intend to do. And also it's starting to set some thresholds that are going to make meaningful differences for developers. The big one that came out not too long ago was coming down on the city of Redmond in Central Oregon and saying they couldn't require 20-foot alleyways. They could only require 16 feet in accordance with their standards. They couldn't kind of add on stuff just because they wanted to have more parking. I'm trying to think of the right words here, but they really just set the standard for this is what is necessary, and everything beyond that, you have to provide some sort of incentive or assistance or funding through other means to make these nice add-ons happen. So HAPO, lots more to come, I'm sure, on them, but really wanted to give them a plug there as well as we look at kind of this deluge of code changes that are happening. And I think I'm turning it back to Seth. We've got this.
Okay, we've got a stack of cards, and I think I have 6 slides. We have a bigger stack of cards and 6 slides and even bigger stack of cards. So we've got 16 minutes, and there's 6 slides left. So this is going to be really quick. So starting off, CFAC. Anybody ever heard of CFAC? Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities. Yes? Everybody goes, oh my gosh, they just made it so developers don't have to do any parking. Bottom line here, I can't get a loan for a project unless there's parking. As soon as a bank thinks you can't lease up, so you're going to hit until all your stalls are filled and you have 50 units left. So CFAC, the idea behind it, decrease the amount of pollution that we are generating from transportation. That's the entire intent behind it. The 2 major things, no parking minimums, as well as all stalls, 40% of all of your parking stalls have to have the infrastructure for future electrical charging. So it's the state saying, you know what, we want people to move away from cars, so we're not going to provide a place where you can park, and you're now going to have 40% of your stalls as EV charging. I can talk about that for half an hour, but unfortunately we don't have time. House Bill 4037, so I believe that effective date is June 5th of this year. So this is something that's coming out, and it is massive. If you haven't heard about this, you need to know what is occurring. So first of all, important to note, Senate voted 28-2 in favor of this. The House voted 52-1 in favor of this. So this is the full legislative body saying we want this. Two huge components to it. First of all, if you are doing a housing project, who can appeal it after June 4th? The applicant. The only person that can appeal a housing project in the state is the applicant. I can't tell you how significant that is. We've spent years fighting frivolous lawsuits, and yes, again, I'm biased, but I think that is one of the things where they're trying to make it so you can build housing instead of fight lawsuits, but probably went too far. And at some point, they're going to come back. And so a lot of these bills we're going to cover right now, it's that knee-jerk reaction, which is saying, okay, we're just going to obliterate everything, then it's broken, and then slowly we're going to work back to what that right moderation is. The other component of this, they're limiting who gets notified about a development. With social media, does anybody in this room think that's actually going to make any difference whatsoever? I have no idea why they even put this in here, but yeah, that's my opinion. Next one, 3746, condos. I don't know if everybody is aware of this one, but there's the language for 4037. Here's 3746, so condos. So the legislative body said construction defect, the statute of repose, statute of limitations, for rental product, 6 years. For purchase product, 10 years. Okay. They then reduced the for sale product from 10 years to 7 years. What did that actually do? Did that fix the fact that the architect, general contractor, developer all get sued at the end of that term? No, all it did is took the date you get sued from 9 years, 364 days to 6 years and 364 days. It actually didn't in any way resolve the fact that everybody on a project gets sued. Almost every architect and general contractor we work with in the state of Oregon in their insurance policy has an exclusion for condos. Oregon is litigious around condominiums. So if everybody says that's an easy point into for sale owning a product, then we need to tell our elected officials that they need to do better. Wage theft. I was really hoping that Mark Meek would show up today because he voted for this. If you don't know what wage theft is, this is one of the few bills I've ever seen where somebody is responsible for the illegal behavior of someone else. So what this says is the owner and the general contractor both can get sued by an individual or bully if, for instance, I pay the general contractor and the general contractor pays the drywall guy. And the drywall guy decides to go to Brazil and doesn't pay his workers. His workers can now sue the GC and the owner, and we are liable. This is demotivating developers and general contractors from working in the state. And again, we're pretty much out of time here. This last one, I thought it would be interesting to put a bill on here that actually failed. So if you go into the Oregon statute and you look at prevailing wages, it says loans and bonds are excluded. So if you're doing a bond, which is going to be repaid, and everybody in this room, depending on where you live, your property taxes are paying for those, Oregon statute actually says those projects for affordable housing, if it's bonded, should not be prevailed. BOLI has decided they want every project in the state prevailed. I have to believe that by the way they're acting. And so this is the first time in my 30-year career where private developers are actually asking for BOLI to give them a determination before they start that they're not going to be prevailed at some point. There was a massive project down in Eugene along the riverfront where Eugene built a road and put in utilities to access some land to develop. A developer comes in and says, we're doing three 5-story buildings. If you know anything about prevailing wage, 4 stories or below is residential wages, 5 or above is commercial wages, they increase. BOLI said because the cost of that infrastructure that was built, that facilitated the development, was more than $750,000, that all those projects were prevailed. Anybody want to guess what the developer did? He knocked the 5th floor off all the buildings. We just lost that housing for the next 50 years that building's there because BOLI decided that, think about the ramifications of that. Every single housing project that is done that connects to a road or storm or sewer that is over $750,000, if that's the direction we're going in, we're not going to build anything. I'll skip that slide. It's really depressing. It basically says that any affordable project in the state is running 30% over market. So we're losing 30% of the potential units we can produce because we paid too much for affordable housing. And if anybody wants to talk about that, I'm happy to discuss in detail. All of these slides, we are going to, anybody that asks, they can send me an email, they can send Sherry an email, they can go to OCBA website and say, please send me the entire deck. We'll send it out to everybody. Okay, so questions. And this thing, if I can get it off, I'm actually going to come stand over here. Here we go. You guys ready? This is speed round. Okay. How do you suggest cities encourage building higher density units? City question. Change the code, which is being done.
Right, yes, yeah. The code, thank you. The code changes that we're doing to allow increased density. You know, it's always a balancing act. We have codes so that people have a reasonable expectation of what happens next door to them. So we always have to be conscious of both neighbors that are already there, plus our need to build more housing. Are there places where we can build more, more density? Sure. Are there incentives that we can do? Yeah, okay. I just got sped round out.
Next one. Your point about the planning timeline is well taken. What do you see as practical steps to address this?
Oh boy, it's a bigger conversation, right? But I'd say you typically have concept planning, master planning, infrastructure planning. Are there some ways to push those together? Maybe. I wouldn't get wedded to one thing, but Diana just raised her finger, so maybe she's got one.
Well, you were in Bend. They streamlined their whole permitting process, right? We can do a lot of streamlining. We can consolidate, and we can look at all those things that are redundant and analyze it. What's taking the most time and fix it. I really think that it is permitting for sure and planning. Yes.
Yeah, and in Bend, one thing to move urban growth boundaries through more quickly, you had in more than one case a single landowner that coordinated a master plan themselves instead of a city-initiated process, and those went like, we're talking a year versus 6 or 7, right?
Do you guys have anywhere to get in the next 15 minutes? No. Okay, anybody that needs to leave, please feel free. We're actually going to try to get through all these as quickly as possible. The last thing to mention on that one, there's no appeals now, right? So before a developer had to submit and wait for that 120 days, see what happens with the appeal. We can now wait 30 days until you get the completeness review, make sure staff doesn't have any major issues. The design team is right onto the permit set now. So we, as mixed-use multifamily, we just cut 3 months out of the process. The entitlement and permitting process, that one change just cut out 90 days. And if you actually got appealed, maybe a year. maybe 2 years out of the process. Okay, Diana, in the context of your stats around the delivery of affordable units, what was the county's goal around these numbers, and did you meet those goals?
We did. We met the goals, that we exceeded the goals. This is prior to my coming onto the board. I won't take any credit, but my colleagues did set numbers, and we exceeded those goals, and we were a little more cautious with this next round for the 900 units between now and 2030. But yes, we did exceed them.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. Mike, related to Senate Bill 1537, what was the benefit to Oregon City for sticking with the traditional variance process over automatic adjustments? Waivers require more administration, which turns to additional time and money for developers. I did not write this.
Well, I think the advantage for Oregon City is a lot of times the automatic adjustments where it's you can deduct, reduce a setback by 10%. It doesn't take into account real conditions on the ground. If everything was flat, square lots, then automatic adjustments might work. But you get into situations where the reality of where the neighbors are, where roads are, where infrastructure is, where those automatic adjustments just become really hard to accommodate. So that gives us the flexibility in those cases.
Home rule?
That's part of it, sure.
Okay.
Sure. But we do have we have a process. Very few cities have been able to get that exemption because they didn't have a variance process that worked for all parties. We were able to get it because we were able to prove that we did.
Full disclosure, I wrote a letter on behalf of the city of Oregon City to the state saying your process worked. So please don't prove me wrong.
Thank you.
Okay. Austin was utilized as a great example for the increase in multifamily development. Austin aggressively waived SDCs and other permit fees for affordable housing. Is Clackamas County looking at waiving SDCs and other permitting fees to increase the development of affordable housing?
Short answer, no. Our service providers are the ones that institute the SDCs, and I don't believe, I will say that we should think about deferring them. And I know that a lot of times you want to say, let's wait till we get an occupancy permit versus the SDCs up front. And I think there's ways we can look at accommodating you, but we need to have a discussion as a commission.
Full-heartedly support that.
Just to add to that, we are right now in the process in Oregon City of deferring SDCs from time of building permit back to something closer to the end, whether it's certificate of occupancy or when you apply for your final plumbing or electrical permit or whatever. So we're working out the details on that deferral. The other thing we're doing right now on SDCs that's in process is tiering SDCs more so that smaller projects pay less compared to larger projects that pay more. 3-bedroom, 3,000 square foot house would pay more than a 1,200 square foot house. A 1-bedroom apartment would pay less than a 3-bedroom apartment. So those both I think will help. To the point that Ben made, we need state help in order to get SDCs down. Cities have to build roads, all the pipes, everything, and that money has to come from somewhere. And we just have to look at financing from other sources other than SDCs.
And just to add, when you say Clackamas County, I'm not talking about cities. They have their own. West has their own SDCs, but Clackamas County's SDCs have not increased. Our transportations have not increased in like the last 5 years. So we do have parks that have increased just slightly, county parks, but otherwise our regular SDCs have not.
One other thing I'll throw out, that Senate bill that never even made it out of committee for a vote, if affordable housing projects, and by the way, 75% of the written testimony were in favor of that bill. Cities, counties, affordable developers all said, don't prevail these projects. Let us build as much affordable housing as possible. So one solution to that would be, if those projects were not prevailed, we could produce 10 to 15% more affordable units with the same amount of money. Anybody here that pays taxes that goes towards affordable housing, you should be outraged